Last year we caught 16 ton of shad, and that's about 3,775 rows, and the balance was bucks.
This is the Alosa sapidissima, better known as the American shad. It's a saltwater fish that migrates to freshwater to spawn. Between late March and early June, shad can be found mainly between Kingston and Coxsackie in the Hudson. Shad can be found as far south as Georgia during the winter months, around here in the spring, and as far north as Nova Scotia until fall. It's a delicious fish, and so is its roe. That's what we're all about this time when we come back with shad fisherman extraordinaire Frank Parslow and Company on the River.
On the River is brought to you by Freihofer's.
I can remember that Freihofer's taste, so fresh and so good it puts a smile on my face. What Freihofer's bakes has always been good for you. Remember the freshness, remember the taste, remember the fun on a Freihofer's base. Freihofer's, always as good as you remember.
I'm Bob Freihofer with On the River's host, Brian Madden. Brian, where do you get ideas for the show?
Well, Bob, it's very easy. The Hudson River is in the news every day. You really don't need to be an investigative reporter to find all the organizations and associations and municipalities that are promoting the river. And we even get phone calls, people saying, do I have a story for you?
Freihofer's has been serving the Hudson Valley for 25 years, and we're pleased to bring On the River into your home every Sunday on Channel 62.
Frank, tell us, what's the attraction of shad fishing for you?
I don't know. I think it's more like a fever. Once you start, you can't stop. Every year I say, well, I did it enough, but then I look out and I see the river, and I got to get out there. And Harry will tell you that too, because he's the same way.
You've been doing it how long?
About 40 years now.
All along the Hudson?
Here, and I used to do it at Kingston Point and what they call Steep Rocks. Yeah, that's the north of Kingston.
Now, you have 8,000 feet of netting, you told me?
Yes.
That's a lot of net.
But sometimes you gotta have 8,000 feet, because if you run two boats, sometimes you can run two nets out of one boat. So 2 nets out of this one, 2 nets out of small, and you're talking about 4,000 feet. And you always got a net here to be repaired. We run in some sturgeon, and when they hit a net, you don't hold them. They put a big hole, you know. You got to do a job on them, mend them.
Now, you're talking about how many shad in a season for you?
Last year we caught 16 ton of shad, and that's about 3,775 rows, and the balance was bucks. Because we keep track of every tide, every drift, and we know exactly what we catch. Then we multiply it. The rows are about 5 pounds and the bucks 3.5, so that's how we come up with that figure.
Is this regulated by the state? Do you have to go under controls?
Oh yes, we're under control of the state, yes.
And how so?
Well, we got to get a license from the state,
right.
And then you got to comply with their regulations.
Is there a limit to how many you can catch?
No limit to how many we can catch. But we can't fish after Sunday or Friday, 6 o'clock in the morning. We got to stop till Saturday night, 6. And that's what they call lift period. And that gives a chance for the fish to come through. No obstruction to get to their spawning ground, which is up there, the main one. Mm-hmm. And they go up there to spawn. But that gives us a rest and time to mend our nets. And
Now, you're a commercial fisherman.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of business do you do?
Well, we sell all we can catch.
Where do they go?
Steve Gadaletto in New Paltz, he buys a lot. Him and his dad, I've done business with him for years. He's a good businessman. Then I have 4 Maples in the Hopewell Junction, and they have 2 stores. They got Fish for 4 Seasons. They take a lot of shad. And then and I do business in 2 Cousins in Albany, and They take a lot of fish, and also the Kingston store.
And you said some places send them to Boston.
Yes, yeah. I have people down the river that pick them up, and they go to Boston, and we ship some to New York, too.
So they go all over.
They do. Yeah.
What about the shad? Tell us about what kind of fish it is and why it's so special and why you can still eat it.
Well, the shad is the largest member of the herring family. And it only comes up here to spawn, and it's here a very, very short length of time. And while it's here, it doesn't feed on anything. Maybe some plankton in the water, but that's all. So, and even with the so-called PCBs in the water, even if they did stay here, it would be very low. You take a striped bass, that's a controversial thing now. PCB is minimal, very minimal in it. And it's more or less a political football, the PCBs, that's what it is.
And it's a long game, too.
That's right. And we got to throw them out of the net, take them out, and get rid of them right away.
The bass.
The bass, yeah. They say they're too high in PCBs, but I really think they want to make the Hudson River the main spawning ground for northeast United States, because the striped bass love this river, and I think they want to hold it, but that's just my interpretation.
Do you eat the striped bass? Or would you? Let's put it that way.
You know, I wrote a letter to the state last year. They asked how I felt about it. I said, Harry and I, we enjoy some striped bass every year. And in regard to the PCB, and I said, Harry is 90 and I'm 69. In other words, I'm saying we eat it every year and we're still alive.
How many years have you been eating it?
As long as I've been fishing, about 40 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell us what we're going to do today. Where are you going to take us and what are we going to do?
Oh, today we're going down to the water company. We're going to get the, well, it's the first of the up. It's what we call a runner. A runner is when you put the net in and you don't catch slack. Because the reason why we're not getting slack is the tides are off a little bit due to this flood water coming down. But we'll catch fish, but we'll just pass through and pick our net up someplace up there.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get fish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Hauling in the shad requires the help of strong arms. To assist Frank today, his friends Harry, George, and Richie. And out onto the river we go, with high aspirations of getting a large net full of shad. Frank's nephew is George Mick, who comes up from South Carolina every year at this time just to shad fish on the Hudson. And George says Uncle Frank got him started with the sport.
For years I had wanted to come shad fishing and listen to my uncle talk about it, and I like the outdoors, and so after I retired from the service, I started coming up about 5 years ago, and I've come up every year since. But I enjoy getting out on the river. The Hudson River is very unique. There's really not that many tidal rivers in the United States, and to fish it, there's a challenge to it, because most of the rivers down south that they fish, you've got the constant out tide. Here you've got the up tide, the down tide, the current shift. You never duplicate a drift. Everyone's different.
And you shad fish down there as well, don't you?
Well, I've gone down. I don't commercially shad fish down there. Their shad fishing is quite a bit different. They do it basically right along the ocean front in the tidal rivers, but the rivers don't have the depth down there. And so they go about it quite a bit differently. They haul seine and such and use some gill nets. But here on the Hudson, they use all the different means of fishing for them. Down the city, they use the stake nets. Throughout this area, they use the drift nets. And then up the river further, they use the haul seine. So you've got a combination of everything on the Hudson.
Also helping out today is Harry Schweigel, 91 years old. Harry's been fishing on the river ever since he can remember.
You think you lived this long because you ate the shad and the bass?
Well, I tell you, I always try to take care of myself.
Well, you seem to have done a good job.
One of the main things. Worked hard, out on the water mostly all my life.
Good fresh air?
Yeah, fresh air.
How do you think the river's come along? You've seen it.
Oh, yes, I saw it when it was nice.
Uh-huh.
And, but now, it's clearing up good though now. I know there's a big difference there last year already. But it's riled up now on account of the storm that we had.
You think it'll ever get nice again?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. I really do.
What do you think some of the reasons have been?
Well, I tell you, sewers and of these here electrical plants, that's one of the worst ones of the whole thing. You know, the one up in the canal there, Schenectady. Oh, all that liquor going down out of there. Because we used to go up there, the canal. See, I run the Great Lakes and coastwise. In war, we used to go out with the ships, escort them up on as they're going across. We'd go out for maybe...
Which war are you talking about?
This here, the last war.
World War II.
Yeah.
You were around for the first one too, weren't you?
Oh, yes, yes. I was in this, in a boat that was supposed to go over to England and mine sweeping. And after we got started, we went out, we was about 36 hours out, and a German submarine come on up. 3 minutes. See, the First World War, they warned you if you wasn't armed. As long as you wasn't armed, then they warn you. Give you 3 minutes. So we had everything ready to shove overboard and get in. And the more we got off of it, bang, down she goes. That's as near as I got to England.
So how long you been fishing on the Hudson?
Oh, well, I was fishing in between, you know. I'm a marine engineer. That's my trade. And I used to take off for shad fishing and sometimes carp fishing, sturgeon fishing. I caught one sturgeon, large sturgeon, off the Sopas Island, 247 pounds.
My goodness, when was that?
We had no scale. That was, I should say, in the 40s, early 40s.
As we reach our destination, George tells us how to prepare a net before it's cast out into the water.
Okay, the net we're going to be using today is a monofilament net. We've got the buoy line packed on one side in the box here, and then we use a lead line on the bottom. That causes the net to sink and spread. We're going to be adding water to it. It makes the monofilament line limper, and when we put it out, that way it will fall free and go ahead and sink to the bottom. If you don't dampen it sometimes, it'll cause it to pen up and tangle, and the net will bunch up and it won't sink freely.
Now these are the buoys?
Yes, sir.
And what do? They just keep it?
They keep the net afloat. They keep the buoy line, there's the top stem, on top of the water.
So you know where they are all the time?
Right.
Okay.
And then it spreads, vertically down to the bottom.
Okay, and you just take some water right out of the river
and dampen it.
Dampen it down.
And that makes it a lot limper, so it'll go out properly.
And how much net is in there?
This is a 1,000-foot net. The average net we're fishing is about 1,000 feet. We've got a 1,500-foot net also for while the shad are a little bit more scarce in the river.
Okay.
When we put this out, we feed it right out through the chute here. We put the end buoy out, which is the marker buoy for the ships, and then the weight of that continues to carry it out, and we elongate the buoy line, and it'll cause it to fall free behind the boat.
After the end buoy is put in place, the net is put out.
Once she gets going, she rolls out quite nicely. The monofilament nets are quite an improvement over the old multi-filament. They don't pen up and tangle as easily.
Some job to untangle these things, I would guess.
Well, if we get them tangled real badly from debris in the water and such, we take them ashore and spread them out on the pipes like the nets you saw hanging. And the monofilament come untangled quite easily. The multifilament tangle up and knot very badly, but these pretty well fall out.
So the lead line puts it down to the bottom and the buoy keeps it up top.
Right. The lead line is an improvement in several ways. One of them being the fact that when you're putting it out, if you've got a small hole in the net, the old rings that they used to use would pass through the hole and tangle very badly. But where the lead line, it falls out just from tension. We've had a lot of debris in the nets here recently because of the flooding, as we've got a lot out here today.
How much separation between buoys there? About 10 feet?
15 feet on these.
Yeah. Six more, Frank.
6 more? Okay, all right.
5 more. 4 more. 3 more.
It's gonna jump up on you.
Yep.
Watch your foot.
Yeah. There we go. All clear.
Now, which way are the shad going to go in?
They're going to be coming down the river now because the tide is going up. They're always swimming against the tide. They actually have to swim double duty when they come up the Hudson because they swim up and down the river trying to get to where they're going.
Do they know where they're going?
They get there every year. There's more shad in the river now than there was when Uncle Frank started fishing, he says.
No kidding.
Each year we get larger shad, larger percent of big shad, and the population has definitely increased even in the few years I've been fishing.
What's our time element here? How long will it take to get some fish in those nets?
Well, usually we're out about an hour and a half or 2, but today we're not going to get slack tide, so it's what they call a runner. The fishermen call it a runner. You run through the water. And I'd say we'll be in the water about 1/2 to 3/4, don't you think, George?
Imagine about.
Yeah.
Tide's moving pretty good right now.
Yeah.
Does the wind have any play in any of this?
Oh yes. When one is to an advantage when the water is clear, they don't see the nets are good when the wind is blowing, and then wind will activate a net if there's a little pin up, it'll shake it out. And then on the other hand, if it gets too windy, then we got to work harder. See that line? That's right, almost going into the net.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to try to show you a fish in the net. If a fish hits along the top, you can see these buoys go down, and that's what we're looking for right now, for a buoy to go down. But I haven't seen any yet.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that their log is caught on the net. Isn't it funny how it moves in and out, the brig? I tell you, it makes us work harder. You know, you got to take all that junk out of the net, and a piece about as big as a matchstick will tangle the net or pin it up, we call it.
That's small.
Yeah, don't take much to tangle a net.
While we're waiting for the shad to bite, we'll go back to shore and we'll pick up Richie Bullock, who will help with the catch.
I can remember that fry hopper's taste, so fresh and so good it puts a smile on my face. What fry hoppers bakes has always been good for you. Remember the freshness, remember the taste, remember the fun on a fry hopper's face. Fry hoppers, always as good as you remember.
Brian, as a veteran journalist, what do you find challenging about producing on the river?
Well, Bob, every week we try to be informative, we try to be educational, we want to be newsworthy if at all possible, and in some cases we even try to mix in a little entertainment value, and trying to put all of that together is the challenge, but I think we're making it happen.
Freihoffers began serving the river back in 1913, and we're pleased to present this Hudson River series every week.
Due to the recent rainfall, large amounts of debris have been washed down the river. Before George pulls in the end buoy, he'll try to push some of that debris away. Then he'll take up the buoy on the downside of the wind.
They're very silvery, aren't they?
They're very pretty. Okay.
What kind of weight are we talking about? 6, 7 pounds?
This one's probably about 6 pounds.
And that's a rowa?
This is a roe shad. You can see the stomach on it is very rounded and full. The bucks are much slimmer in the stomach and they're firmer. The development of the roe within the shad takes a lot of minerals and nutrients out of the flesh of the shad, and it causes it to be a different texture of meat. They're very soft at this time of year.
And what's the taste do? Any difference?
The taste is, well, the buck shad is a little bit sweeter tasting this time of year, and the meat's a lot firmer and flakier when cooked, where this remains soft even after it's been cooked. Here's a buck. I'll show you the difference on him.
This buck is even smaller, isn't it?
The bucks run smaller than the roe shad. They run smaller in size, and also you notice the very narrow stomach on them. And they're not quite ready to spawn yet. As they grow closer to the spawning, you'll see some swelling in the stomach. And the melts run out. It's a secretion that they fertilize the eggs with. But they do run quite a bit smaller than the bucks. The large run of fish is not here yet. When we start getting the large run, the bucks are larger than the roe you just saw come in.
Then after a while, Frank came over on another boat to join us.
Is this Kitty?
Yeah, it's Kitty. Somebody was howling. Hello? So I was trying to find out if it was for me.
No, Kitty, we're picking up the net now, and we're getting a few fish.
Here, you want to give me that?
Oh, that's good.
So I'll call you a little later, okay?
Okay.
George, what happened with the net over there?
Well, we had a sturgeon hit our net 3 days ago, and whenever a large sturgeon hits this net is very weak, you know, for that size fish. And what they do is they roll up in the net, and then after they've had enough being hindered in their swimming up to spawn, they just decide they're going to leave. And when they do, they leave us with something you could drive a car through.
Boy,
they
I
just
guess.
rip a whole section.
Or a truck.
But there'll be another, when we have our lift period, we'll go to mending this section back together.
How many we got so far?
We've got about 25, I believe, right now.
Not in there yet, I don't think.
I saw one dancing right out here. I was saying earlier, when we're removing the stripers, we hold them by the lip. That way we don't damage the gill section, and that way when we release them, they remain alive.
Need the hook, George?
I've got one back here.
You see how it's swelled up, all the roe in them?
See, this hook helps remove the netting from the striped bass. That top fin on a striped bass, if you hit your hand on it, punches your skin, and then George got one last year, and he had to go to the hospital with infection.
Really?
Yeah, so we use gloves and the hook to remove them.
What would cause the infection?
Well, it's probably due to the bacteria in the water, and then handling fish afterwards, you know, shad and things like that. And then when we get busy fishing, we don't think about ourselves sometimes. We don't take care of things we should.
The last thing to be put into the boat after catching the shad is the end buoy.
You forgot what it is, huh?
Shoemaker, right? I forget what it was.
The buoy's in. What does that mean, Harry?
That means the end.
Now to head back to shore with our proudly caught shad. Besides catching fish commercially, Frank is known to have the best smoked shad recipe in the Hudson Valley. Now let's find out his secret.
We offload them from the boat, and we put them in the fish boxes and ice them down. And then we put them on what we call our little railroad car. Years ago, when I moved here, I didn't have a convenient way to get the fish from the river to the road, so when you get old, you got to use your head a little bit more. So I thought about a way to make a little railroad car to bring the fish from the river up to the road or where we cleaned them. So, and then we just smoked the bucks, and we taken fillet the bucks at our stainless steel processing table. And after the bucks are filleted, scaled, and cleaned, we bring them down in containers like that. And we do about 65 at a time, but I can do 120. But I feel that 65 is a good amount in which you can get them in and out, and it's more convenient than 120. So after we bring them down here, I take these here vats, which is approved by the Board of Health, and I make a brine. And when I say a brine, it's salt, brown sugar, crushed pepper, crushed bay leaf, and garlic. And I put them in the brine for about 4 hours. And after that time, I set them up on our stainless steel racks, and I rinse them off. And then at that point, I put them in here on these racks, stainless steel. And then I turn the fan on, which air dries them for a while. And then in the back, I start a fire and have a slow smoke in the beginning, because if you put the heat on them quick, they're softened. But after in there about 8 hours, you can put about 160 degrees, which is important because there's bacteria in meat and fish. Above 145, you don't have to worry about botulism. So I give it the heat for at least 8 hours at 160, 70 degrees. And then I back it off and give it more smoke flavor by putting on a lesser amount of heat, but more smoke. And I use cherry wood. Cherry wood enhances the flavor of a shad. People years ago talked hickory. Hickory, I think, is a little tart on fish, and I found that cherry wood is the best, and that's what I stick to now. So here's what the end product looks like. Some are on the backs and some are the other way. And then from here we put them on white styrofoam trays, and we put a little plastic bag over them, and we got an air-conditioned room which we put them, because they shouldn't get moisture after they're smoked. And there's some fish dealers take a smoked fish and they put it in their case on ice. That's the worst thing you can do, because that salt in there absorbs the moisture in the case and tends to make the fish spoil, and you can't do it. So I put an air-conditioned room in the bags with the bag open so the air gets to them, and then they're ready for sale.
So there you have Frank Parslow's way of handling shad. By the way, Frank has a switch that he developed right now on the moon. Frank was a scientist who helped put the man on the moon. Also, we got a letter recently from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC, Mr. Douglas Stang, who is a senior aquatic biologist. He wants to put the record straight, he tells us. During a recent program of On the River, April 12th, Mr. John Cronin of the Hudson River Fishermen's Association stated the DEC conveniently made no collections nor analyzed any samples of striped bass for PCBs. Mr. Cronin also indicated no samples or analysis of striped bass were scheduled for this year. Well, Mr. Stang tells us that there is an exception to these statements. In 1986, 268 striped bass were collected and analyzed. The bass samples were distributed both temporally, March through September, and spatially in river miles 12 to 153. He says 240 striped bass are currently scheduled to be collected from the Hudson and analyzed this year. We're going to have him on, or one of his representatives, sometime in May. Thanks for coming aboard this time. I'm Brian Madden on the river.